America's first feature film hit the nation like a thunderbolt. A groundbreaking artistic triumph, it overnight turned a cheap novelty into a respected art form. But tragically, its success seared into the public eye racist images that would impact the country for decades. On May 11, 1896, Thomas Edison's latest invention, the kinetograph, first recorded the bustle of city life in moving pictures. The first American movies averaged 20 minutes and were shown in storefront theaters called Nickelodeons. Costing a nickel, their affordability made them popular attractions for the mostly immigrant working class. Most middle-class Americans shunned these early films, calling them cheap shows for cheap people. They stuck to the theater. Even filmmakers of the day regarded movies as merely film theater. The camera rarely moved. One filmmaker, David Wark Griffith, saw the potential for more. Between 1908 and 1913, he made 450 short films, enabling him to experiment with new editing and camera techniques. Griffith was hungry to use what he had learned on a grander scale, and decided to adapt The Klansman, a popular play about the Civil War and its aftermath. Its author, Thomas Dixon Jr., was a racist preacher with an inflammatory message. "My object is to demonstrate to the world," he once said, "that the white man must and shall be supreme." 1915 marked the 50th anniversary of the end of the Civil War. There were many commemorations, but they would be overshadowed by an event held February 8th at Clunes Auditorium in Los Angeles. The premiere of Griffith's new movie, The Klansman. Broken into 2 acts, running 3 hours longer than the average Nickelodeon show, it was unlike anything Americans had seen before. Griffith awed his audience with epic battle scenes and sweeping spectacle. He used close-ups to get a more realistic acting style. He also liberated the camera, following alongside the action, sweeping the viewers along in a way they had never before experienced. If the movie had simply ended with the war, it might have been hailed only as a triumph in filmmaking. Act 2, however, depicted the era of Reconstruction as a reign of terror by the newly freed black slaves. They terrorized helpless whites, make a mockery of the democratic government, and lust after white women. The film ends with the triumphant ride of the Ku Klux Klan, arriving just in time to restore order, and with it, white supremacy. To a modern audience, Griffith's film plays as pure melodrama, but to the novice moviegoer of 1915, it held a remarkable emotional power.
When the performance was over, in these first year or two, people stood on their chairs and screamed, and were just, tears were running down their face.
The impact was not only emotional. Griffith saturated his movie with historical details, using Matthew Brady's famous Civil War photos as sources, and title cards from Woodrow Wilson's popular History of the American People. The realism of Griffith's film led audiences to believe that what they were seeing was the absolute truth, and the message of this distorted history was clear. Blacks could not be trusted with any form of social or political responsibility. In one stroke, Griffith had invented film as art and as propaganda. And the most disturbing symbol of the film's power came from the highest office in the nation. Woodrow Wilson was the first Southern president since the Civil War, and during his campaign pledged justice for African Americans. Once in office, however, he imposed Jim Crow regulations on federal offices, the one place where blacks had been free from this type of discrimination. White and black clerks who had worked together since the Civil War were separated. On February 18, 1915, Griffith's film, under its new, grander title, The Birth of a Nation, became the first film to be shown at the White House. "It is like writing history with lightning," President Wilson declared. "My only regret is that it is all so terribly true."
Even though we think of Wilson in many ways as a great liberal president, from his point of view, the racial relations as they're depicted in the film were by no means offensive.
With the president's endorsement, The Birth of a Nation opened in New York's Liberty Theater on March 3rd. Costing an unprecedented $2 per ticket, the film was an overnight sensation. Critics were ecstatic in their praise. The New York Herald Tribune wrote, "A new epic of art is reached." African Americans, however, saw no art. For them, the film was a magnified reflection of contemporary racism. By 1915, blacks, no longer slaves, were not completely free either. Politically, they faced disenfranchisement with laws that prevented many from voting. Socially, they suffered not only Jim Crow segregation, but also the terror of lynching. The Birth of a Nation was a direct threat to their struggle for equality, and their response led to the growth of one of America's most powerful civil rights organizations. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was created in 1909 for the purpose of agitating on African American issues. The year The Birth of a Nation opened, it was only 6 years old. The film became an ideal rallying point for the fledgling organization. The group used their official newsletter, The Crisis, to speak out against the film, but its chairperson, W.E.B. Du Bois, felt that more than words were needed, and organized the NAACP's first nationwide protest. They picketed movie theaters and lobbied local governments to ban the film. Their advocacy managed to get some of the film's most offensive scenes cut. Between 1915 and 1973, the NAACP challenged The Birth of a Nation at least 120 times. Although they were not able to stop the film's run, their efforts led to two unanticipated triumphs. The fight strengthened the NAACP by helping to publicize their goals and attract new members. By 1919, total membership had increased nearly tenfold to over 91,000. The film also served to jumpstart the early civil rights movement by building a Black United Front and creating a model of activism for the future. Their annual report of 1915 claimed, "Nothing has helped so unloosen the energy to stimulate the cooperative support of the colored people as this attack on their character and place in history." Unfortunately, the NAACP was not the only organization invigorated by Griffiths' film. The original Ku Klux Klan had disbanded in 1869, but in 1915, inspired by The Birth of a Nation, William J. Simmons resurrected this American terrorist organization. He used the film as a recruiting tool, placing notices in newspapers alongside ads for the film. That same year, lynchings reached their highest peak since 1908. And within a decade, membership had swelled to over 100,000. The Klan still exists today, a tragic consequence of Griffith's inspirational artistry. The Birth of a Nation caused dissension in nearly every major city it played. In Boston and Philadelphia, riots broke out, and outside a theater in Lafayette, Indiana, a black high school student was shot to death. Eventually, it was banned in 5 states and 19 cities as a threat to public peace, but this did not stop it from becoming America's first blockbuster. It is estimated that between 1915 and 1946, over 200 million people viewed the movie.
It proved to people of all parts of society that film was not a curiosity, but was a legitimate narrative art form.
The middle class had been won over, and the economic impact was enormous. To replace the Nickelodeons, huge movie palaces were built for a new and expanding audience. Within 2 years of the film's release, movies became the 4th largest industry in the U.S., making over $300 million a year. The Birth of a Nation had given birth to Hollywood. Unfortunately, the greatest impact of Griffith's film is one of perception. In 1933, the Pain Fun Studies, the first study to measure the effects of movies on children, screened The Birth of a Nation to middle and high school students. After, their opinions of African Americans dropped significantly. Researchers wrote, it created the largest effect found in any of the experiments we conducted. History professor Leon Litwack writes, more than any historian or textbook, the vivid images of The Birth of a Nation fixed in the public mind the image of a race of inferiors. The damage done by Griffith's film is too subtle to be measured today. But nearly a century after the film's debut, its powerful images still resonate, as Americans continue to struggle with racial intolerance. In 1992, the Library of Congress placed The Birth of a Nation on the National Film Registry. Challenged by the NAACP, Librarian of Congress James H. Billington defended the decision, stating, "Bigoted and racist as its treatment is of African Americans, The Birth of a Nation is an inescapable part of our history." As for D.W. Griffith, his film remains an American paradox, triumph and tragedy combined. Film historian Russell Merritt wrote, "We have not escaped the technical impact of his work, nor have we as a nation stepped beyond the shadow of his theme."